actually really excited to have you on today. I talk about it a lot on my personal content, and I truly believe in it. The mindset that somebody needs to be successful, in any area, really, not just business but just any area of their life. You almost have to have that right mindset to get there and achieve your goals. And so I think that's what a lot of people, lack. And, that's following your content is definitely pretty motivating and pretty interesting on, how you approach the mindset and body connection.
Sure.
Yeah. So just tell us, where you are today, and then we'll kind of figure out or go back and see how you got started in medicine.
So for me, the journey wasn't a simple one. Like today, obviously now I work with entrepreneurs, CEOs, athletes, celebrities to be able to help them create what I call an unshakable mind. And the unshakable mind is really the place where you're completely centered, and no matter what, in the chaos of whatever storm is going on, you're still able to move towards the direction of where you want to get to. And that unshakable state is a mental one, but we can't dismiss the physical one, right? So I started my career in the world of physical therapy, and then I was like, what controlled that was the nerves, and I went into chiropractic school, and from chiropractic school I went on to understand the mind and functional medicine, functional neurology, and studied all this stuff over the last 30 years of my life. And to understand, okay, what is it that makes us tick? What makes us move? What makes us grow? And, I was on the path to medical school initially, at least that's what I thought I wanted, or we were supposed to do at least. And I realized that medical school wasn't where I wanted to play, because medicine is about the study of pathology. It's about the management of disease rather than the expression of performance and expression of life. And so I found my path going down the roads of chiropractic and got into the world of chiropractic. And, once I got in, I started studying this stuff. I started studying NLP early on. Tony Robbins' CD set early back in the day was a game changer for me. And then I got into practice. And as I started working with patients, I started realizing some major game changing things. And then I started helping people heal. And heal is just an acronym I use, helping energy align with love, without doing anything, just asking questions. And so when I started to ask questions, patients started getting better. And they said, I don't really need to be adjusted. I don't need to be touched. I don't need the stim. I don't need all this stuff. I just started getting better. And I was like, all right, well, hold on. Maybe there's something here. And then all of a sudden, I started getting CEOs and celebrities, or even just, within the local business, it just started to spread. And now to the point where guys like David John and John Burke and Emmy Award winners are clients in that. But it didn't start easy, because I went through my own divorce where I had to figure it out. And what I was doing with clients at one point was one thing, but I was on stages all over speaking about, mindset, as people call it, right? The vision boards, you gotta have a positive mindset. You got to get over the hurdles. And look, the reality is this, and I'm going to say something's probably controversial in this conversation, is that traditional personal development doesn't work for most people. It's not. It's 5% of the population that actually works. They did a study that showed that most people that go to personal development programs, 3 months later, most of 98% of them are exactly where they were when they started.
Kind of like a drug addict.
Kind of is,
goes
right?
through rehab.
It's crack.
It goes through rehab and then relapses, right?
It is.
Is it because that, they're going to it because they want to improve, but they never, have the discipline to continue it after they go through the program or whatever personal, development program they take? Is that one of the main reasons, or why do you think?
I don't think that's, I think I have never met a person that honestly said, hey, I can help you improve, that didn't want to improve. They want to improve. It's not that they don't want to. Most programs are built on people's experiences, right? Here's what I did to be successful. Let me show you what I can do to be successful. That's arbitrary. That's a subjective experience that is not built on science. And I said, and I was that guy doing that back in the day. And when I went through it myself, and I went through this divorce of my life, I figured out. And I remember backstage saying the same thing. Gotta have a vision. When the why is big enough, the how takes care of itself, right? We've all heard those platitudes before, but it didn't mean anything. And I remember going to a seminar where I was backstage with all these guys, talking to them about the whole thing. I'm like, guys, I need to make money. You guys don't understand. I'm about to go broke, and I have nothing. Like, I literally lost every dime I had. I mean, I was doing intermittent fasting before it was a thing. Not because I had to, or not because I wanted to, because it's because I had to. And so I asked these guys, how do I get over this? And they would tell me the same answers. You got to change your beliefs. I'm like, well, how do you do that? And there was no system. And
I think that's a good thing for people to realize, is it is hard to just magically change your beliefs. Somebody can tell you that all day long, but it's like, no, you don't understand. Like you said, divorce and this, and you just can't get out of your own head.
Well, I'd created a belief that you could have. I went home that night and I figured out the first process of how to rewire my own brain. And I'd created a belief that you could have love or money, but not both through my divorce. I've realized I had to figure out the anatomy of a belief was. And once I get to the anatomy of a belief, then I have to re-dissect this and rebuild the pattern in my brain to do that. And that's what I did. And that's what I started doing. And then I wasn't making any money, Sean. Nothing. For 9 months. And I was doing the work. I was disciplined. I was making 200 phone calls a day, leaving the messages, following up, doing what you're supposed to do in the business. 3 days later, I make my first deal, 180,000. I go back, rewire some more, made 100,000. Rewired some more 2 days later, made 80,000. I'm like, wait a minute, there's something to this game. And then I set out on the journey to actually rewire my entire brain, and then set on the cause to the mission to be able to help other people to rewire their brain, not only to gain success with monetary, but also their health, their relationships, their life. And I realized that, you know what? You can live what people call this ultimate life for themselves. You can. There's no question you can.
I agree with that.
Yeah. And so I don't think the reason people don't, I think people want it. I think the problem is that we're teaching personal development mindset from an old antiquated model that doesn't work anymore. We now know more about the brain and neuroscience than ever before. And when we understand how it works and we actually teach people on the platform of how the brain actually works, people get results. I see it every day. I do it every single day. And it's not something that I have to coerce or manipulate or try and motivate someone. I'm not a motivator. It's the last thing I am. I can be motivating, but I'm not a motivator. I'm a scientist. I'm a doctor.
So when they can't change their mindset, or you need to get rewired, where does someone start? Like, if they don't know you, or they just found out about you, they start watching your content. Where do you have them start?
Well, I have an app that people can use, right? You can rewire your brain. You can go download the LT Mind AI app and just start downloading it, and you can start rewiring your brain with it. It's built in. It uses a voice detection thing, and you talk into it. It'll tell you your emotions, and then I've got an AI built in that you can actually rewire your emotions from it.
Really?
Yeah. And it's really powerful. It's built for everybody, that everyone can use it. We're now integrating with Apple Health. We're in the process of doing that. So it'll show you that your emotions and your HRV, it'll show your emotions and your heart rate. It'll show your emotions and your sleep quality. All that stuff's going to change now. Now there's a system we can do that. So that's the first place. First, you got to ask yourself the question, though, right? Before you even download an app, you got to ask yourself the question, I think, do you want to change? Ultimately, if you don't want to change and you're comfortable being where you are, then nothing's going to change, right? They say that vision moves people more than, you got to have a vision to move forward. Actually, that's not true. Neurologically, people will move away from pain 2 times more than they will move towards pleasure.
Okay.
So it's got to be bad enough for you to sit and say, you know what, this sucks. This really, really sucks. And when this sucks, now I can move forward.
You got to hit rock bottom.
I don't know. That's got to be rock bottom. I think it's got to be enough for you to sit and say, I don't want this anymore. I don't want this anymore. I like to sit and say, someone like you, and you're a performer. It's not about, you're not going to allow yourself to hit rock bottom. And a performer doesn't hit rock bottom. A performer says, I'm happily dissatisfied, which means that I'm good. Life is good, but I want to get better.
Yeah, I don't have that problem. That's what I always think every single day I wake
This
up.
is my point, right?
Yeah.
So a performer says, I want to get happily dissatisfied, and I want to move myself to the next level. Sometimes, like if we look at mental health, we sit and say you got to be at the rock bottom and the most depression and the most suicidal thoughts, and that's when you're going to come back up. Man, I don't think you have to. I think you have to sit and say, you know what? Life is good, but I think I can make it better. I think I can go to the next level. And those are the types of people I find make the biggest shifts the fastest.
So if somebody has no idea where to start, they can download this app. Is that step one?
I think that's step one. Or, get a copy of the book, do something along. I'm not trying to promote my
No. Yeah, I was just curious if somebody wants to see you personally, is that where you start? You start with the app, or do you work with them one-on-one?
So we do have programs. To work with me one-on-one, it's harder, right? It's not for everybody. We have programs like the Unshakable CEO that I was talking to you about, right? Like where it's more upper tier. We have programs. My goal in my business was to be able to help every single walk of people, right?
Sure.
And so we have programs for the people that want to just download the app and that's where they are financially in their life. Cool, download the app, use it every day. That's what I built it for. We have people that say, you know what, I want a little bit more intimate training, a little bit work closer. I'm a salesperson. I make a couple, I want to get to $250,000, $300,000 a year. I'm a small business owner. I want to move to that level. Great. We have a program for that to help people do that. Right. But what the first step would be, like, get on a call with someone on my team to sit and see what's right. Then we have programs for people who are, who want business consulting as well as the health side. And then we have like the CEO executive, and then I have my private space for my celebs that I'll travel where they want.
I don't think that they have to hit rock bottom either, but a lot of people, they want to change. But is it just because they don't want it bad enough? Is that why you're saying they don't start?
No, I don't think so. I think that people don't know that they can. I think people get so frustrated. So do you mind if I geek out a little bit?
Yeah, go for it.
So there's a part in the brain that nobody talks about it. I've been saying this for 25 years. Now they've actually discovered it. There's a place in the brain called the habenula. And when we set goals, targets, strategies that are not congruent to who we authentically are, right? Who we ideally are, then what we do is we are triggering what's called a failure mechanism. And this failure mechanism allows your brain to now sit and say that you're not good enough. You're not going to be, and it creates emotions of guilt, shame, anger, and resentment. Those get locked into your brain, and then what it does, it lowers your dopamine response. And so we need external dopamine versus internal dopamine. So we need social media. We need drugs. We need alcohol. We need sugars and all these things to activate that dopamine cycle, because normally on the day-to-day when our mind is quiet, we're not activating it. So we look at neurotransmitters of someone, we'll see dopamine levels down in the pits. And those are the people that need to search for external dopamine versus internal dopamine, right? So most people are setting goals, strategies, and targets that are not truly congruent to their values and identity. And when they understand their values and identity, then you understand it. Like I just did finished a 4-day program in Dallas called Creation. And in this program, I take people for the following year. I do it once a year. And I take them and I show them, okay, what's really your true identity? Then set the goals and strategies on that. Because, for example, right, I'll just use me as an example. My biggest goal is to teach and educate and help people heal. That's what I'm here to do. And I feel that in my heart and soul. So if I base my goals that, you know what, I'm going to make lots of money, and I judge myself by the amount of money I make versus the amount of people I impact, I will always be a failure, right? I will always be a failure in that. But if I set my goals based on the targets and trajectory, knowing who I am, not arbitrary, like there's a whole neurologic blueprint to this. You now create that. Now you can go forward in that. Now what happens is you always move your self towards success. So goals itself wasn't created till 1945. We didn't bring that into the American culture till 1945. So now when people are setting goals and strategies that are not congruent, they keep themselves stuck. That's then what they do is they say, I'm not good enough. I feel like a failure. I'm not good enough. I did it before. It didn't work.
I thought that always related back to, in my mind, it kind of relates to discipline, right? Because when I start anything, I'm not good. And so I know that if I have the discipline to do it for a long time without seeing a lot of results, I'll eventually be really good, but then I'll really like it. And then again, my brain will just be like, okay, now I'm great and I can do more of it.
Which goes back to the same conversation we were saying earlier, right? Performers have a method to desensitize themselves. So it's called systematic desensitization, which is exactly what you're doing, right? As we were talking about outside, when you start something new, you know I'm not going to be good. So you know what? You're going to make mistakes. And performers are good with that, right? Performers are good with, hey, I'm not going to be good. I'm not going to be great. Because you've emotionally trained yourself to be able to sit and say, I can move forward to something, but I have a systematic desensitization process that I'm not going to allow that to affect me if it's something that you actually find important, and only if it's something that you find important. But I promise you that there are things in everyone's life that we've done that we said, you know what, that wasn't that important, so we didn't do it. We didn't follow through, right? You're fit, you work out, you train, but someone who says they don't, right? Maybe someone's obese, maybe they don't work out, they don't train, and they're trying. It's going to come to January, and they're going to go out, and they're going, oh my God, my new goals, and they're going to stop. You know it, and I know it, right?
I was in that industry for a while, and January 1st, it's January 2nd.
That's right.
Gym fills up, and then March it kind of slowly goes down like this.
Exactly.
Just every year, the same cycle. Not everyone. I'm sure there's how many percent people stick with it? 1 or 2%. Yeah.
Minimal.
That's just human nature, I guess.
People want to start something.
No?
It's not human nature. Human nature, true human nature, is to actually train them and wire their brain to make weight loss part of their identity. This is the gap in the industry. This is the gap in how it works. It's not about losing weight. Connect that. Look, I struggled with my weight for a long time in my life. I drank like a fish. I smoked like a fiend. I did all the things that a doctor's not supposed to do. When I say these things, people are like, you're a doctor, you know better. Great. How many doctors know better? But then why do they still do it? right? Weight loss is not hard. It's not hard. Everybody knows. Eat less, exercise more. At the end of the day, sure, we can say the hormones and all these variables that come into play. But if you eat less and you burn more energy, you will lose weight.
And kind of goes back to discipline. That's how I always look at everything. It's like if you just have the discipline long enough for whatever you're trying to achieve, you'll eventually achieve it.
If it's in your highest values. You won't be disciplined in something that is not in your values and identity.
Makes sense. That's why I never related to anybody else. I'm like, why don't you just do it?
Yeah.
Like, so if I want to do something, like I said, I tell myself, okay, it's going to take a long time.
Right.
Number one, if I want to achieve it, it's most of the time something worth doing is going to take a long time to get there.
For sure.
So I'm able to tell myself, if I do it for a long time, I'm going to be really good at it. And then I'm probably going to achieve the goal that I'm looking for. And so I just never understood how somebody didn't think like that.
Yeah.
I tell my wife, it's like, I don't understand how somebody could just sit around and not exercise or sit around and do this, but then they talk about wanting to do it. I'm like, why don't you just do it? And that's where I was like, I don't relate to people like that.
Yeah. And it's interesting, right? And it's hard to, when you're a performer, you're an achiever in life, which you are, you've trained yourself to become and go take action. However, like everyone has had these experiences in their life, and it started early on for a lot of people. Like, and truthfully, I think, I don't say this as a fact, I say this as an opinion. I think the educational system trains this, right? Is that you get a certain grade, you're achieving. You're either going to have two choices. If you get bad grades, you're going to get pissed off and say, screw this crap, I don't need this, I'm going to figure it out on my own, I'm going to do it. There's birth the entrepreneur. Or you did really well, you got great grades, and I like that, there's birthed the intrapreneur. Because both are forms of successful, both can be successful. But with that middle gap, that's where the struggle is. That's where the people sit and say, I didn't get great grades and I didn't get pissed off enough to go prove the world that I wanted to do something different.
Yeah, I never thought about it all the way back to the education system, but I 100% agree with you. I mean, I think that's way outdated. And, I guess it does rewire your mind to just kind of fall in place and like, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to conform to whatever they're telling me to do. And then a lot of entrepreneurs just drop out and they go, well, I have to figure it out, right? And I don't like school and they're not good at it, but then they go and start some $1 billion company.
Of course, yeah. Right? And that's why people use like Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates as these foundational arguments for entrepreneurship that doesn't
the
need
0.0001%. Yeah,
completely
that barely ever happens. Yeah.
Barely ever happens. But, people like to use that as an argument. But there's no question there's a psychology of an entrepreneur, and that entrepreneur is saying, you know what, I don't need this crap, I'm going to do it my own way. And that psychology, you've had it, I've had it, I guarantee it. Like I'm going to go prove it myself. And if you're watching this podcast at some level, you're probably like that too, right? Like
I think reality. That's why I think people want to change, and they want to get the right information to hopefully either motivate them to change or actually teach them.
Sure.
And so I think that's where a lot of people start. They either listen to a podcast because they want to learn about, either business or entrepreneurship or mindset. And a lot of people just, I think, don't know where to start. I think that's what makes them stuck. Like you said they start on this self-development path, but then they relapse.
Yeah.
And so what gets them out of that relapse phase? Like eventually, like if somebody does finally figure it out, is it because they just, when I said hit rock bottom, but is it because they finally just get to a point where like, I can't take it anymore, I'm gonna lose the weight, I can't take it anymore, I'm gonna be successful, I need to feed my family? Is that where somebody just like makes a switch in their head and goes all in?
I think so. I think the first emotional phase of growth is resentment. You've got to get pissed off with where you are, and you got to get pissed off with where the pain of that has to be bad enough. There's two sides of this. Let me define, right? So in my previous career, I ran a company called Mental Toughness University, and we trained companies like Johnson & Johnson, Procter & Gamble, Toyota, worked with sports teams in that as well. And mental performance, there's a game of performance and then there's a game of optimization. Let me put it that way. When we go to perform, what we have to realize is you have to use emotions to your advantage. And that's the key. When you become unshakable, you use every emotion to your advantage to get you the result of the outcome. And you're not worried about the noise on the outside. So the first stage is you're going to get resentful. And you have to use that resentment to empower you to step up. And when you realize that you step up, you're going to have to lose that resentment eventually. You can't sit there and be mad at the boss 12 years ago and use that anger as fuel, because eventually what that does, and that starts to destroy the body. right? But for the first little bit, it gets you to move. An interesting fact is that when you're afraid and scared, that only stays in your brain for 30 days. After that, it moves into the body and it becomes part of your organic system. So you hold that emotion in your body. So we've got to be careful of not overusing the emotions, that it stays in our system, but use it enough to propel us to take action.
I feel like a lot of people, do take action, and then they do feel that way. They get pissed off enough where they do it, but then that only lasts for a couple of days. And
That's
then
right.
And then they go, it just, for some reason, they're pissed off for those 2 days. They're making a change. They start something different, but then they kind of go back into their complacency, right? So what makes somebody just keep going back through that loop where, one day they want to go do something, but then the rest of the week they're procrastinating?
Well, here's how it works. Let me break it down for you, right? So when you get super excited, motivated, pumped up, or whatever it is, you go, whatever it is you do, you read a book, maybe you talk to Sean and you get super fired up. You're like, I can do this. I can go after it.
1 or 2 days.
Or 1 or 2 days. What's going to happen is you're going to go through and your dopamine levels go up. And then they're going to hit this plateau and then they're going to have to come down. It's called a catecholamine in the brain, right? These catecholamines go up, but they have to come down. And these are sympathetic neurotransmitters. They're dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. So dopamine goes up. The other side of the balance of that is epinephrine and norepinephrine. So you go up, but then you crash. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to go up again. And then I'm going to crash. I'm going to go up again. I'm going to crash. So that's what happens. People said, I can only do it for a certain amount of days, 2, 3, max 4. And then what they say, you have a dopamine flush. So that's why people get sick after 3 or 4 days after a motivational event, right? So instead, I'm totally the antithesis of that, because why raise the dopamine to crash? Let me teach you how to balance the brain so that you actually don't need the high or the low, and you continually rise like this. And you're rising upward, consistent trajectory. So when, like for my clients, I don't want you to get motivated. I want you to get inspired. There's a difference. When you become inspired, you take action from within continuously, versus motivated. You need someone on the outside always coaching to keep you accountable to get the result. Then it becomes a habit. Rather, if you're inspired by it, you're going to take action. You're not going to need me. And it's funny. I'm actually pretty, with the people I work with, I'm pretty like, look, I'm not going to babysit you. I'm going to teach you the tools. You do it or you don't do it. Then it's up to you. And they will go do it, because once the tools kick in, they learn their identity. They learn the path. They learn the reason that's holding them back. Then they move on their own.
Yeah, you only have to keep them on a path. I don't know. You might know the time frame, but as long as they're consistent, then they eventually get good at it, and then they get confident, and then they like to do it more.
They do, but here's the interesting thing, right? Studies are now showing, people have heard, it only takes 6 weeks to make a new habit. Everyone's heard this, like,
yeah. Is there a time, or is it just really?
There is. Stanford did a study and said it's 256 days. Okay. So interestingly enough, when people are saying, I don't have to do it for 6 weeks or 2 months or 3 months consistently, that's not true. That's not true at all. Here's the other thing. For example, like, let's take smoking, right? Let's use nicotine as a thing, because nicotine is a dopamine.
Increases dopamine.
Increases
whether
dopamine,
you're
right? So
vaping
all
or,
of this.
Yeah.
So when you do something and then you say, okay, I'm going to stop doing this. If I, like, as I said, I used to smoke cigarettes because I didn't know how to manage my own emotions. That's why I did it. I remember when it started. I remember how I did it. And every time things got stressful, what do? I go outside, light that cigarette. Here I am. I'm comfortable.
Calms you down a little bit.
Well, yeah.
I've never smoked, so I don't
It
understand.
numbs you.
Yeah.
It lets you, okay, I'm not in this uncomfortable, crappy norepinephrine, epinephrine place where anxiety kicks in, depression kicks in. Okay, now dopamine's up. Now I can feel better. So I think I'm doing better. You're not. You're just artificially rising it. So you go into the world and do that. But the problem is that now when you stop smoking, those neural nets are already built. That neurology is already in place. And so if you stop taking cigarette or stop smoking cigarettes and you take one puff, bam, you have now activated that entire neural net to start back up. And that's called Hebb's law in the brain. So the brain will then light up that pathway again and say, oh, I remember this guy. This is the same thing. That's why when you sit and say, I'm going to change a habit, and you finally gradually get yourself there, you go back and say, well, I did all right for 6 months. Let me just have this one puff, one cigar. It's one cigar with the guys.
I feel like that's how drug addicts get back.
That's how it is.
It's like they stay clean for so long, and then just the one night they feel strong enough because they haven't done it in 100 days, 200 days, right? And then they just go right back into the life.
Versus realizing that, hey, look, I have to have a bigger reason for me not to want to do that. I've taken the steps to take that out of my system. Now, my mission, my inspiration, what I want to do in this world has to be more important than the fleeting dopamine surge that I get at that moment. But what'll happen, watch, and you've all heard this, like when you hear this, I stopped smoking for 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, and then something really bad happens. You start going through a divorce, or someone dies, or something. They're like, I need that cigarette now.
And they're uncomfortable.
They're uncomfortable. They go right back to it. And then they start back on the path. Once you make the decision to that and saying that's it, you have to understand this is an anatomical process. It has nothing to do with how strong you are. I think we put all this crap on people's heads to sit and say, you're not strong enough, you're not good enough, rather than understanding how the science works. And I say this because I was that guy. I was that guy that wasn't strong enough. I was that guy that couldn't get out of it. And I had to train my brain to become unshakable to live my life. And which is why I train people to do it now, because that was my weakness. I would lean, I'd get stressed with my ex-wife and get into an argument. I needed a cigarette. I'd get pissed off at something in my office. I needed a cigarette. I'd run out of the office. I needed that cigarette because I needed dopamine.
It's probably the same thing with alcohol too, right?
100%.
So somebody does the same thing. They're stressed out all day at work, and then they get off and they're like, I just need a couple drinks.
That's
and
it.
so that's that same thing's just trying to relax and not be stressed, or whatever happened to them during the day, they can get rid of it at night, right?
That's right. They go home. They say, oh, just a drink, just a scotch, just a vodka. It's just one. Just have it on the rocks. It's keto, crying out loud. It's keto. There's no carbs in it. It doesn't matter. It's still detoxifying your liver and hurting your liver's function and destroying your brain cells, right? And I mean, we've read different studies out there from, you could have one drink kills 10,000 neurons.
I think the studies for anything, there's always some that skew toward making people believe it's like, the study says 2 drinks a day is fine. The study says, whatever is fine, or 1 hour a day of this is fine. And so I'm sure there's like studies out there to promote whatever somebody's like telling themselves that it's going to make them feel better.
I agree. People will take that study and make it for themselves. Like red wine has resveratrol, so now you can take all the red wine. But what about what it's doing to your brain? And I'm not against drinking.
Me neither. I love wine, and that's probably I don't cheat on anything else, and that's probably the one thing that I do. If we go to dinner, I'll have a couple glasses of wine. Probably is not the greatest for me, but I know that study's bullshit. I know that there's somebody trying to justify, it's got resveratrol. I know that's not true.
Yeah. If you really want to take resveratrol, which has a lot of antioxidant healing properties, just take the supplement.
Yeah, you probably have to drink a shit ton of wine.
Yeah, you do. You have to drink tons of it. I don't know the exact number, but you have to drink a lot of it. Instead, just take the resveratrol and call it a day. And if you want to have a drink, then have a drink. Like that, I'm not saying not to, but I remember, I'll tell you, Sean, it was really interesting. I was this place in my life where, you get together. It's Wednesday night, it's guys' night. Thursday night, it's guys' night. You go out. And I remember I used to go out and I'd be like, without question, you just go to the bar and vodka soda. You don't even think about it. You just say it, vodka soda. And you're like, I remember I'm like, why did I do that? Why did I ask for a vodka soda? What consciously did I do? And I realized I did nothing consciously.
Subconsciously.
It was an autonomic habit.
It's a habit, yeah.
Right?
You show up with your friends. It's just part of the habit of showing up.
Part of the drill.
Start talking to them, order a drink.
And so I said, you know what? I'm going to do something different. So I went to the bar one night and I said, I want to be in control of my mind. I want to be in control of my habits. So buddies go there, they're like vodka soda, Makers and 7. I said, club soda. And the guys are like, what are you doing? What are you doing? I said, nah, I just want to do club soda. And they're like, why? Why aren't you drinking? I'm like, no, it's not that I'm not drinking. I just want to do a club soda. And I didn't drink. And then the rest of the night I didn't drink. And I thought, that was an interesting experiment I was running with my own brain. I consciously now chose my habit versus unconsciously lived a perpetual pattern. And I kid you not, like some of those people, I started hanging out with less. But now when I go to dinner, if I want to go with same friends or whatever I want to do, now I'm consciously choosing what do I want to do? What do I have the next day? One of the most important things you could do if you really want to take control of your diet and mind is put the most important thing you're going to do first thing in the morning.
If somebody comes to you and they're trying to make a huge change in their life, I know it's not ideal to say, we'll just use alcohol.
Sure.
If they're trying to, hey, I need to quit alcohol, I need to quit smoking. Do you recommend them still consciously choosing to have a drink every once in a while? Or you're like, no way, I have to cut all this out to create a habit, to create it long enough to create a habit to where they don't actually just want to drink all the time. I know in weight loss and fitness and all this other stuff, it's like to get results faster, it's like you need to cut everything out, you need to change your life. But that's because people are doing so many bad things.
Sure.
So I wonder, what your thought process is because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are like, I don't do a lot of it. And, I don't want to change my whole life. I still want to do this every once in a while and this every once in a while. But you're still trying to rewire their brain to actually make good decisions and make good habits. So do you allow them to just like, hey, you can do it every once in a while? Or how do you train them to think?
So let me explain. Great question.
Because I feel like that's everybody's, like where they stick. They're like, if since they can't think long term, since they can't think far out, they're like, oh, I don't want to eat this way forever. There's no way I could live like that.
So let me explain. So I had a client one time, and he stopped drinking for like 3 months, and he was struggling. And he said, I said, I bet you still crave alcohol. And he said, yeah. I said, I bet you're fighting the urge every single day. He says, I do. I said, when I'm done with you, I will put an old fashioned in front of you, and you will choose whether you want it or not. And you will feel complete freedom of it. And he says, really? And I said, yeah. You'll be able to make the choice consciously whether you want it or not. Because as long as I sit and say that that's bad, you're going to want it. As long as it's still in your nervous system and your brain is wired that I can't have something, that's the first thing you're going to go after. And then you're going to create guilt, shame, anger, all this resentment, and that's going to make you want it more. Instead, what if I showed you, you know what, let me find out why you actually drink. Let me find out the cause of it. Let me rewire that whole thing. So it's not a system in your body. We rewire that habit. And then let me put a drink in front of you, and I'll go to have a drink with you. And I'll have the drink, and you decide whether you want it or not.
It's almost like when you give them the power to choose something, it's more like they're taking control, and then that's going to create more good habits.
Well, you've
right?
got to create the devoid of emotion, right? People think emotions are healthy. That's not true. Emotions actually create the chaos. What we've got to do to become unshakable is eliminate the emotion so we can get you present. And when you're in the present, you now get conscious of your decision making. And then when you get conscious of your decision making, now you're not saying, I got to resist this. I got to fight this. You know what? My buddies smoke cigars right in front of me all the time. They're like, you want a cigar? No, I'm good. You sure? Like, we can stop if you want. I'm good. If I don't like it, I'll walk away. But I have no issues with it because it's not something I'm choosing to do. But back in the day, I remember I'd have to stay away from that environment. We've all heard the things, right? Don't go to those environments. Don't be in those environments.
Yep.
It has nothing to do with that. If we train our mind, I want to put you in the middle of that environment so that you consciously are able to now handle that no matter what. That is an unshakable state.
I feel like I've had that unshakable state, early on. I felt like it came from anxiety of just wanting to do, like feeling like I always needed to do better. Yeah. That's where it came from early on. But then as I got older, that's where I'm at, where like, I don't care anything else is going on around me. Like, this is what I choose to do. And this is the goal that I have. It might take me X amount of time to get there, but I feel like I have that mindset no matter what goes on around me, because, in business, and everyone else does too, and in life, I mean, it's a roller coaster every day, right? And the people that can get there are the people that can have the discipline to do the same thing every day, or not let those emotions control them on the day that something goes terribly bad, and then they go home and they yell at their wife or whatever their emotional state is. I feel like I'm pretty good at managing emotions now. Early on it was anxiety, and it was a little bit frustrating just because I'm like, I don't know why I feel like this every day. I would just wake up and feel like that. But over time it turned into, I could see myself getting to a goal. And then since I've achieved so many goals since I was 20, I'm like, okay, it's really about just focusing on the goal and having the discipline to do something for long enough. And then you eventually like it, but then that makes you feel good every day. And then you can really tune out the noise.
But here's a question that maybe I can challenge you with, if that's all right.
Yeah, no.
What if you don't have a goal?
I've never not been like that.
Exactly. So here's the thing, right? So here's the what I call the entrepreneurial disease, is that there's always the next thing to chase. I always need the next goal.
And it is like that.
Right. But that's not health. That's not mental health. That's continuing to drive in a sympathetic state. And you achieve a lot. Societally, people look at you, but that doesn't mean that the internal system is healthy. It means that I'm just going for the next thing. I know I wrote the book called Chasing Success, right? So this is what it's all about. We're always striving for the next thing. And our society is constantly doing it.
It gives me purpose, I guess. But I like the journey.
It's
And
cool,
so
right? You
yeah,
do, because
that's the
dopamine's
hardest
getting
part.
hit.
Yeah. It's like every day I'm like, okay.
What if purpose, I like to say it this way, purpose versus presence. Can you be present and purposeful versus just purposeful? And most people, what I've found in the entrepreneurial space, lots of success and lots of achievement, lots of accolades by the external
And what
world.
do you mean by present? So every
Presence
day,
is where you don't need anything. You don't need the goal. You can actually be in the present and express completely who you are, completely without, okay, I got to get up. Here's my list of things. Here's what I want to go after. I need a vacation. All these things that you're trying to clump up in sections in your world versus what if you can be still in the stillness of what is. That's a very different space for most people. I'm not saying it's not you. I don't know that. I don't know that. But I'm saying most entrepreneurs who are super successful, what they do, it's all right, and your dopamine levels continue to go after that. And I would bet dopamine is actually lower in someone like you than it is higher.
I've heard that a lot with, I mean, just the entrepreneurs
Yeah.
and in general and high performing people is usually,
It
it's
is.
actually like a little bit lower than,
It's lower because it's no different than a drug addict. You just found your drug to be entrepreneurialism and money. So society says we're better. The human brain doesn't care where it's finding it. It doesn't care for success or abundance. It cares for survival and balance. And so my goal is to take entrepreneurs who are purposeful and turn them present and purposeful in that same capacity. That is the unshakable state where it's like, you know what? I'm in my present and I get it. Everything's going on. I don't need to achieve or get to a goal. The goal is already there.
I guess I like my life that, I kind of build my life around the things that I like to do.
Sure.
And so that's kind of the, I guess, purpose or something every day, or I'm not really necessarily have to achieve a certain thing, but I try to do all the things that build my life in a way that I do enjoy every day. And I don't have to go and escape and go on vacation or do this. And my wife used to always joke, she's like, you never want to go on vacation. You always want to work. I was like, well, I like doing that stuff. So it's like, why am I going to pay to go do something that I don't really enjoy doing?
Sure.
Doesn't make any sense to me in my mind. And so I was always like that. A little bit better now. It still drives me crazy if we go for too long, but because I'm like, well, why would I escape the life that I spent all this time trying to build? Because I do the things that I like to do every single day.
Agreed. I'm not disagreeing, but I'm gonna
Yeah.
throw
No, keep going. Yeah.
Discussion for
Yeah.
people listening as well, because it's so contrarian to what our mental health really is. 72% of entrepreneurs deal with mental health challenges. We don't call it that, right? I'm not saying you're dealing with
Well,
mental health,
I grew up with things that, I mean, just constant anxiety and panic attacks when I was younger, even from 15, but nothing happened to make that happen. I just remember waking up one day and I was like that. And so I don't know, there wasn't like some traumatic thing that happened. And so ever since then, it just had it.
Well, it's interesting. Most people think like, oh, there's got to be this major trauma in your life for that.
I had a pretty good
That's
upbringing.
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's part of the problem.
Yeah.
Right? People think there's a term I've coined called positive traumas. So the more achievements you get, the more you chase more achievements.
Yep.
And that's what breeds the down cycle. And so when we look at, in a state, it's like, I get it. Cause I'm sitting there like I was that guy. It's like, I love doing what I do. I love seeing patients. I love doing that. It's great. But is that present? Is it present in that moment on the vacation to be present? It's not. It's pulling us back to the next dopamine addiction, because we get the dopamine by doing the work. We get the dopamine by achieving that. And dopamine has value. Don't get me wrong, right? Dopamine gets so chastised in our world. It's not the dopamine that you really want. What you really want is the oxytocin. And real oxytocin comes in a state when you're purposeful and presentful, because you have 4 stages in the brain. You have the dopamine, you have the endorphins, you have the serotonin, and then you have the oxytocin. Real oxytocin is not about just connecting to other people, what they say, like the mother-child bond. Real oxytocin is about when you're living your life and love who you are at that moment. That's when you have the maximum oxytocin release.
I think I'm there more than I've ever been.
Good. I love that. It's great. And I'm glad that you are.
Definitely now, again, it's like, it kind of comes from like trying to build the life that I really like to do. Luckily, my wife's supportive. She's a business owner.
Smart. That's good.
So, I think that worked out, and I really aligned my life that way because she was the first person I met. I was like, wow, she's different. She has all these other goals. And so it's part of the reason I was attracted to her. But I think that, doing all the stuff I've done in my life to get to where I am today, I've built the stuff that I like. So I guess I don't know. I feel present and I feel purposeful every day. And so I guess that's what I don't know what you mean by present.
I know. That's why when you look at a neurotransmitter test, that's the only objective way to really know it. Because that's what kind of we're saying is that when you have, all of us are so good at compensating. And then when we look at a neurotransmitter, we can see what's really happening, what's really going on. And then you realize, oh, okay, here's what it is. The mitochondrial function. Oh, this is what's really happening. Because there's another stage of success, what I like to call like a life where you really love it. And the brain is actually functioning from the prefrontal cortex the majority of the time. The parts of your brain that is so centered in what's called the central executive network. And when you're functioning from that space, you have a completely different aura of your life. And an aura is kind of a generic term, but a completely different experience of your life and the world around you. And if you're listening to this or watching this in some capacity, most people are going to sit and say, you know what? I'm good because I've mentally hit success. Completely, I get it. But we also know that a lot of people who go down that path, then I've always found that I've been successful at what cost? And so if you've been able to do that for yourself, I think that's amazing.
I can't say, well, I'm here now, but 6 or 7 years ago, I think that's probably where it came from. Whenever I told you I was getting those tension headaches every day, and I finally hit a point where I was pushing myself so hard that I think my body just finally gave out. Probably 15 years of stress. And again, I didn't look at it that way at that time. It's like, I'm not stressed. Like I like to do all this stuff. Like I'm not stressed, but maybe I really was. And then I would try to I would exercise because it would reduce the anxiety. Yeah. So I would over exercise and under eat. So I went like all in on that. It was like, oh, if I do the hardest workout and work out twice a day, I can keep the anxiety down. But pretty much I was ruining my body, hormones, everything,
Correct.
every nervous system capability that I probably had because, at the end of the day, I couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. It's like, man, I've never felt like this before. I feel like I'm sick, like almost like I'm dying. Like I can't get out of bed. The fatigue was so bad.
Sure.
But I think I just ran myself into now looking back at the time, I thought there really has to be something wrong with me, like bad. I was 36 years old. I was like, maybe I have, cancer or just something like a brain tumor or just something because that I felt that bad. But I think it was just the 20 or 15 years of just like hard as I can. And then the over exercising, under eating at the time, just like really drove me off a cliff. And I think that's where I started turning everything around. And now, 7 years later, maybe 6, 7 years later, I'm to the point where I feel that way. So it took me, I guess, that rock bottom thing, but also didn't know.
I think it's perpetuated, right? Social media, people. That's why I love what you're doing in this conversation, right? It's perpetuated. The more extreme you go, the harder you work, the better it is. And that's actually not true at all. Not true at all whatsoever, 100%. What you do is you create adrenal fatigue when you work that hard. And you don't put the right calories in. Everything is over fasting and under eating and all of that. Those extreme states create illness in the body, and we think we're doing better. And we think, we see guys out there who are just perpetuating. You don't want it bad enough. You got to work harder, and that's not true. That's just not true. It's an old antiquated thing that people listen to get you. That's an old model of the brain and psychology. It's not true. We have to understand what it is. We have to understand that the body is trying to actually create balance. And the more we burn it from the outside, the more adrenal fatigue kicks in, the more you're getting into fights, the more you're getting short-tempered. And your body's trying to give you symptoms to wake you up, but we're just not listening to them. Most
That's
people
for sure.
do.
And I just kept going harder thinking, I used to work out and I would feel better. And then that turned into like, I'll work out twice a day and I'll feel a little bit better. But then it just finally got to a point where my body gave out.
More is not better.
It took me 36 years to realize that.
Well, you're lucky you did it at 36. There's still people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s still doing the same thing, don't know the difference.
Yeah.
So it's wise of you to be able to do that, but many people don't.
Well, I think it took all those physical symptoms. It wasn't really a wise thing. I think it took all those physical symptoms to get to a point where like thought something was really wrong.
I think that's important, right? I have the saying like, or every symptom you have is trying to wake you up to get you back to balance, but it's understanding what those symptoms mean.
That's what I didn't do. I was just like, oh, if I push harder, I didn't really realize what I was doing to myself. And so I
Right.
just kept pushing and kept pushing and kept pushing. And that's something I didn't realize. And by the time I got there, I said, something's got to be wrong with me.
Well, think about
There's
it.
no way. I've never felt this. Like it feels like I'm sick almost. Like
Yeah.
I couldn't even get off the couch like that, like the flu type energy. And so I thought I was sick, but I wasn't. I just had messed up my body so bad mentally and physically that it just put me in that state. And then constant state of headaches every other day. Pretty crazy. I hope, nobody else has to go through that. That's why I talk about it a lot too. So hopefully
Well, I'm glad you.
somebody
that's exactly what I'm
can,
saying.
somebody can maybe realize it before they get to that point.
Well, I think you're hoping that they don't, but I think more people do than we even think. Like, think about it, right? The number one problem in this country, health wise, is not diet and food. The number one problem in this country is chronic stress. Whether it be money, whether it be relationships, whether it be chasing, it doesn't matter. Either on one side, when you don't have enough, you're in chronic stress, or the other side is when you're chasing for more constantly, you're chronic stress. Chronic stress is impacting every aspect of our life. And that's what breeds and helps create a chronic state of inflammation. The more stress, the less the body can process. Because then what you're doing is you're now putting cortisol in the body. And that cortisol now turns into fat. And then the body starts storing that as the issue. And then we're like, why can't I lose weight? Why can't I lose weight? Let me go exercise more. And then what you're doing is you're breaking your body down further, and you're breaking it down further, and it's storing it as more fat versus muscle. And you understand, you know the physiology.
You get in a cycle.
You get in the cycle. And then it's like, oh, well, and then comes in, well, let me take these dopamine laden, Lay's potato chips and all these junk foods. And then now you get dopamine addicted to that. And then the whole cycle of that begins.
Yeah. I wish that on no one. And, that's why we talk about it a lot on here. And part of the reason that got me down the functional health path too was because of that, because
Sure.
it got that bad. But so I'm definitely a believer. I definitely, I did where I saw the biggest jump too is anti-inflammatory, everything,
Sure.
Diet and just trying to do everything in my life to like reduce inflammation. And I did see a huge impact, less brain fog, a ton more energy. So I think that inflammation is probably a chronic problem with most people, right?
It is. Inflammation is the number one cause of the problem. The inflammation physically, when you look at the body, you look at inflammation, you look at diabetes, you look at blood pressure, you look at all these things. It's inflammation that's causing the problem. And I would say that the number one cause of that inflammation is going to be chronic stress that is imbalance of the mind, and external stresses, physical stresses, and mental stresses both contribute. Like, meaning that, for example, sleep, right? Sleep is super important to you. But when you're stressed out, you can't sleep. Your brain, when you feel like you're a failure all the time, it's connected to the habinula. Your melatonin cycles go off. You're off cycle. You can't sleep properly. You have a place in the brain that if your emotions are saying, "I'm not good enough. I'm not happy. I'm a failure," and this is the language. It's connected to the part of the brain that makes the melatonin cycle. So you won't sleep. You'll get up at 2 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning, and you'll lay there with your eyes wide open,
Worrying,
yeah. Stressed out, and you're gonna think maybe it's a factor that I got all these things, my mind's going all over the place, or maybe it's the fact that your brain just isn't governing the emotions around it. When you can rewire that and you govern the emotions, your body sleeps. It shuts off. You get a natural, normal rhythm. Of course, then you also have the lights and the external factor. It's managing the external factor and the internal factor to be able to optimize your health.
So at the end of the day, it's just mindset. I mean, rewiring your brain to have the mindset you need to achieve a certain goal or outcome, right?
I don't think it's just that. I don't think it's just that. I think though that's where it begins. I really do think that's where it begins. I do think you got to move, you got to exercise, you got to take care of your body, you got to take care of your health. 94% of the serotonin is made in your stomach.
I actually posted something about that this morning or yesterday.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know that. I didn't know that for, till I was 36 years old, 37 years old, when I started kind of going down that path and learning. It's like, oh, so under eating and over exercising isn't good for my serotonin and mood, right? Yeah.
I'll give you a true story. So I just finished this 4-day event, and I was like, I got to the hotel that you're so graciously set me up with. It was fantastic. Thank you. And so I get to the hotel. I'm talking to my son on FaceTime, and I ordered just some dinner. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to have a little dessert, right? I'm going to have a little dessert. I've earned it. I've worked hard. I just did 4-day seminar. I spoke for 14 hours a day. I'm going to do it. I'm going to go have a little dessert. I never eat dessert. Like, it's very, very rare that I eat dessert. I like a little piece of dark chocolate every night, just as a 70 to 80% cacao, right? Which is anti-inflammatory in its process. So I do like that every night. So I didn't have it. So I ordered, I'm like, fine, get me the, whatever it was, some espresso dark chocolate cake or something like that. I like chocolate. So I have it. I have maybe half the piece. I didn't have the whole piece. I had half the piece. And I said, this is going to be interesting on my brain function. I knew it. I said, this is going to be interesting on my brain function. So I went to bed and I got up, or excuse me, I went to bed and I normally sleep like a rock through the night. I don't have an issue sleeping. I sleep really, really well. I had 2 nightmares that night. I never have nightmares. Sugar lights up your brain like cocaine does, like that.
I've heard that before. Wasn't there a study that came out that
it was Time magazine?
So how much? So dopamine increases. I mean, cocaine increases dopamine X amount of times, and then sugar increases it. What was it?
I don't know the exact figures on. I couldn't speak to the figures on it, but it was interesting. Like, I was like, huh. I got up in the morning and I'm like, why did I have nightmares? And I was like, of course I did. Of course I did, because I put sugar in my body.
I posted a video on that, and it was a podcast I had between me and my doctor, and I was saying the same thing. I didn't know that it was made in your gut. First comment that comes in on the video was a girl that goes, I actually didn't know that either, and I'm in mental health. And that was the comment on there, and she just put this little emoji on there. But it's like, it really is interesting that I think maybe people oftentimes overlook it, right? And then that's why people say, diet, not necessarily diet restricting calories diet, but the correct diet will reduce inflammation, boost serotonin. I couldn't imagine if you were just eating fast food every single day of your life. I mean, how bad it really is. I think people just end up feeling that way for so long. They don't even remember what feeling good is, right? Since they were, 17, 18 years old. Yeah, I don't think they know.
Even know it.
And I tell people that all the time is like, if you really knew how good you could feel.
Yeah.
By just like cleaning up some things and reducing inflammation, like, you have no idea. And it doesn't happen overnight. So I think that's what happens with most people. They go, well, I eat good for 2 days. But I think how long does it take to kind of repair the gut? It's got to be
at least 3 months.
Yeah, 90 days. That's what I was going to say, 90 days.
At least 3 months. 3 to 4 months is baseline, depending on how bad it is, right? Like, I'll never forget the moment I stopped drinking caffeine. I used to drink 3 to 4 cups of caffeinated coffee a day. Mm-hmm. I don't drink caffeine at all anymore. Now, if I do, that's not true. If I take caffeine now, it's literally like this much, because I'm specifically manipulating my system to give me the energy I want for a period of time and getting me to move. Like, for example, I was in Europe and I was using caffeine to make sure I stayed awake. So I went to sleep on the plane. It was done consciously, right? Yeah. Rather than, I need caffeine for something. That's where I was. So I said, I'm going to stop caffeine. I said, I don't like this. I don't like this thing having control over my mind. My dad taught me a long time ago is that if anything or anyone has control of your mind, they own your life, to the degree that even nicotine or caffeine or anything, it owns my mind. I said, I'm not interested in that. I want to be in control of my mind. And so I said, I'm going to stop caffeine. Now, I kid you not, Sean, the first day, the most ungodly, blistering migraine of my life. It sucked. It was the worst pain I could ever feel. Second day, not as bad, maybe 80%. Went down a little bit. By the third day, it was there, maybe 50%. 4 o'clock in the afternoon hit. And I swear on my children, this surge of energy that came into my brain and my body was the most euphoric experience of my life almost. And I realized this is how good the body can feel without this drug. And it completely, I was like, why? This is amazing on the inside. I don't need this caffeine thing. I can do this on my own. I'm going to use a natural stimulant inside to get it. I'm going to go exercise. I'm going to put oxygen in the body and do what needed to be done so that I can make this myself feel that way. I kid you not. Then since then, took 8 years later, then I started using a little bit of caffeine to manipulate.
Yeah, I didn't drink it for 10 years, but not because of that. Is because it made me too jittery and I got too much anxiety. Again, This is in my 25 to 35 before all that happened.
Yeah,
I can drink a little bit now. I just drink a little bit of green tea. Coffee still kind of wires me up too much, but a little bit of green tea. But what you said about the oxygen thing, I think I did see a video where you're using the EWAT system.
I do.
And so I do all that same type system. I think I do cold plunge. I do the PEMF mat, and then I do the oxygen. and then I'll do the red light too, that I have at my house. So maybe explain to people, because, you know, a lot of people ask me questions, but the way you feel after you do it is just so much better, and you can think so much clearer, and you have so much more natural energy without the caffeine. That's how it feels, I guess. Like you have a bunch of caffeine energy, but without that weird jittery feeling where your mind can't operate correctly.
Here's the interesting thing about EWOT though. So I was doing the EWOT, and by 3:00 in the afternoon, I was dying, exhausted, like just completely exhausted out of my mind. I'm like, what is happening here? Like, this doesn't make any sense. Like oxygen, mitochondria burning. I don't get it. And I found out that my DNA, my mitochondria doesn't process the oxygen as fast. So I have to actually change the way I do EWOT. I can't do it like for a 20% or 20-minute hit ride or something like that. I've got to take 5 to 7 minutes.
I'm doing it for about, I was doing it 15 in the very beginning, and then now I do it for about 10 to 11 every day.
Yeah, I think, if it works for you every day, great. I can't do it every day.
So that's the other thing I stopped. I don't do it every day. Let me correct that. I started doing it 7 days a week. And then I felt like I kind of hit a wall. My doctor's like, no, just do it kind of on your off days. And so now I do it. I weight train on Monday, Wednesday, Friday heavy. And so I don't do that on those days. I only do it on Tuesday, Thursday. And then if I'm in Houston, I'll do it Saturday. If I'm not here, I just don't do it.
Right.
So it's 2 to 3 days a week, almost every week now.
I think that's better. Like, this is the whole thing with biohacking, right? This biohacking world, people are like, I got to do it every single day.
It's like anything else. It's like
it's extreme.
Too much is not always good enough or good, right?
Like too much cold plunging is actually not good for you either. And like all these guys are out there saying you got to do it every day. Depends on your DNA. I can't do it every day. My body, it'll turn into a inflammatory state. So I have to do it maybe twice a week. So I cold plunge twice a week. And I used to do for 6 minutes, that they say, right? I can't do that. My body, it'll turn it into a stress state, which puts on cortisol and stress, and it'll actually put on weight on me rather than help decrease the weight and the inflammation.
Yeah, so everybody's different.
That's what I'm saying. You've got to customize the biohacks. And if you're going to do the biohacking processes and tools, moderation is always still the smart way to do it. Don't take anything to an extreme. Like, do it a couple days, see how you feel, but also listen to your body's feedback, because the one thing that's so not discussed in it is how your body processes these DNA or these biohacks, right? And I learned it when I saw like, for example, vitamin D. Vitamin D is super important. Vitamin D is super valuable. Since I was a kid, I'd go in the sun for a long time. I'd go golfing with my buddies, this and that, and I would get into a heat stroke if I go golf at 3:00 in the afternoon. So I compensated, started wearing a white hat. Okay, but I'd still break into a heat stroke. I did my DNA testing, which we do with our clients, and I found that, you know what, my DNA, I actually don't process vitamin D. I don't convert vitamin D2 to vitamin D3 efficiently. So I actually have to supplement vitamin D to D3, but I have to do it during different phases. I can't do it all at one time. If I'm in the sun, I was just on the beach with a buddy of mine. We were out in Miami. I went walking for like 2 hours. I felt like crap because I can't have that much sun exposure. And my point in saying that is I never would have known that unless I actually found out. So customize these things for yourself so that you can actually understand what's real for you. And I think that's the gift of, as we move forward into the future, is that health is going to be so individualized and empowering. So cool.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
And that's kind of where we're at. And that's, what I've been following too. And it happened over time. It, because I didn't, I just started learning about all this stuff, and then my doctor started introducing it slowly. But, of course, now I think that has benefited me the most, is doing every single test and actually doing what's right for me. That's and not because whenever I told you I crashed and had all those headaches, and, before I found the doctor, I'm going to all these normal doctors, but then I'm just trying things off the internet. Oh, this makes this guy feel better. Oh, this makes this person feel better. Oh, they're fasting this amount of time. Oh, they're doing carnivore. Oh, they're doing this. And so I'm like, well, maybe that's my problem. Maybe I need to do that. And come to find out, I just needed to do the right testing and do what was correct for me.
That's right.
And then, so that's where I saw those like big jumps each time I did something. It's like, oh, that's even better. And then, I had one of my doctors on that is, probably one of the smartest guys I talked to in genetics.
Yeah.
And he broke it down. I don't remember what he said, but he's like, that's the reason you feel so good off NAD. And then he, Gentry was in here too. And he goes, that's the reason you don't really feel that much.
Yeah.
He's like, he like, of course he goes through all the gene breaks and all that stuff. He's like, that's why. And he's like, that's the thing, is like not everybody needs the exact same thing.
It's true. I mean, I take all these supplements. People are like, oh my God. And they'll say, Dr. Rewire, okay, so tell me. And I'll get all the DMs, like, tell me what to feel.
Yeah, tell me what to take. And it's like, well, you can't
tell me
always
what to take. They're like, how do you feel? How do you feel after that? I'm like, look, I live a super clean life other than the occasional tequila I'll have, right? I live a super clean life. Like, if I was super sick and wasn't healthy, super inflamed, sure, I'd see a massive jump. But I don't. Like, now I see like maybe tweaks. So I don't see this massive surge of energy.
I'm kind of like that too. No.
At this point, you would be, right? Of
Yeah.
course. It's the first, when you're super sick, you see the body do these amazing things. But then as the healthier you become, it's tweaks and refinements, I believe.
I think that if everybody starts with the diet, which is the gut, anti-inflammatory, I think that's the first step. If you don't have any money, if you don't have the money for testing yet, definitely start there, because like you said, a lot of your neurotransmitters are made in your gut.
Well, if you're starting, if you're doing guts, just start with gut glutamine, right? Get gut glutamine, which seals up the gut.
Oh, does it?
Yeah, gut glutamine is one of the most important things that people can take.
So just regular glutamine, like the supplement?
It's called gut glutamine.
Okay, what's the difference? So is there a difference?
I don't know that there really is a difference.
Than like regular, like
don't know that there
L-glutamine?
is.
I came from that industry a long time ago, so I do know the bodybuilding side, L-glutamine, I remember that, but I didn't know if that
I think it's the same thing.
Okay.
I think it's just marketed as gut glutamine.
I got you, okay.
But I think it's the same thing. But if you just take like 5 to 10 milligrams or 5 to 10 grams, grams of the gut glutamine every single day, like I do it every day, no matter what.
I take creatine every day now, and I didn't take it since I was, I took it when I was 18 when I'm trying to build muscle. But then, after talking to a lot of people on the podcast, talking to a couple of my doctors, they're like, no, there's a lot of cognitive benefits, and it's one of the most studied things out there. So I started taking it, and definitely.
It makes a difference.
Yeah, it gives you a bunch of extra energy.
I have my parents.
Oh,
my
really?
parents are in their 70s, 10 grams a day. 10 grams.
Is there a difference? Because I take 5, and I guess I've heard most of the people say 5. Is there a difference? Like maybe you get older, you're going to take a little bit more, or is it?
They say anywhere between 5 and 10. I don't think that it hurts in any capacity. I think a guy like you, who's a bigger guy,
I do 5.
You could do 10. It wouldn't hurt you.
Would there be any extra benefit, maybe, or?
I think that just keeps you're going to use it for processing ATP, so you can get more energy, right? So you could get more energy from it for sure.
I'm gonna try it. It's not gonna hurt.
Like I like doing cardio twice a day sometimes, right? So those days I'll definitely use
take extra,
take a little bit extra. But I switch 5-10, and anything you do in the body, right? You don't want to keep it so consistent. You want to adapt it. So some days you do 5, some days you do 10, some days you do 5, some days you do 10. Just keep the body on edge. Like you don't want to say this is our standard all the time, because the body is an adaptive mechanism, and we have to allow it to adapt.
That's what I've heard about the cold plunge every day.
That's right.
If you did it every day for a year, you're gonna get used to doing that every day for a year, right? So you don't want to continue. You want to get off and get back into it, or come on like a schedule like you have, where it's just 2 days a week, where your body's not fully adapting to it.
The whole point of it is to shock the body.
Yes.
If you don't shock the body, it's like, oh, this is now routine. It's no longer a shock.
That's my problem. I get addicted to stuff where I'm like, okay, I felt really good this week and I did all of these things. And so like, I want to repeat those steps to do those things that made me feel a certain way.
And the cold plunge, the sauna, they release heat shock proteins, but it's got to be a shock to the body for that to release those. If it's just habit, now you've just made that the frequency or the state that's normal.
Every day.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. It's hard for me to stop doing something once it's like these 3 things this week made me feel amazing. It's like, I don't want to stop those 3 things.
That's the dopamine. Circling back to where I started.
Yeah. And I did eventually hit a wall with like the whole doing that 7 days a week, not the cold plunge, but all those other things.
Yeah.
And so I did found the same thing as you, is now that I do it on my, not necessarily recovery days, but in between my heavy weight training days and splitting it up, I feel a lot better longer periods of time.
100%.
So now that was where my schedule got, where like, okay, I feel good every week doing it this way now, instead of just like when I first started doing it every single day. And I'm then finally hit a little bit of wall. It's like, man, I don't feel as good. Or you started getting low energy and I'm like, man, it's weird. All this stuff was working before. So
it drops off because it adapts to it, right? It's kind of like weight training or going like, fasting or any of these things. Like you can eat completely clean for a period of time and then your body's going to hit a wall.
Yeah.
And then you're going to need to have a carb day. You're going to have a refeed day so that the body says, oh, I'm not in starvation anymore. Yeah. And say, oh, now I can do that. And then you go back to doing what it is you were doing.
Yeah. I talked to, I had Jay Campbell on here and he talked a lot about doing fasting, but he said he only does it. I think this kind of the same thing I talked about my schedule. He does it on Tuesday and Thursday on his days that he doesn't weight train heavy.
Sure, makes sense.
And so then he's like, I can constantly kind of keep my body guessing and produce a state of where it's actually beneficial instead of just doing it every single day where I don't eat till 4 o'clock. He's like, that just didn't really work for me. And he said, doing it this way, I feel the best. I think it has the most benefits. So that was pretty interesting too.
Yeah, we have to let the body adapt, and I don't think the biohacking community doesn't talk about it. Well, most of the biohacking community is selling products at the end of the day, right? So, I mean, and I get it, and I think that
and a lot of them work, but I my experience and goes back to what you're saying is works in moderation. That's and right. It depends on the person, and you don't want to let your body just get used to that same thing all the time.
Completely.
Man, thanks for coming on. Let everybody know where they can find you.
Yeah, I mean, drrewire.com, Dr. Rewire, and on all socials. If you want to start rewiring your brain, you can go to ultimind.ai. It's right actually on the website too. You can just download the app, and it's really cool the way it's designed. It's kind of set that you can just talk into it. It gives you your emotions, and it says, okay, you're happy, you're sad, and it's not trying to make you more happy. It's actually trying to make you more balanced and unshakable in mind. And so what it'll do is then once you get those in place, then there's an AI that's programmed that's going to walk you through the exact questions. It takes you 3 to 5 minutes every day to do it. And I'd say you start in the morning to start your day that way, and you start at night and kind of end your day with it.
I'm sure everybody's different, but how long does somebody have to do that daily before they start seeing a huge difference?
Or see it right away.
Okay.
Instantly.
So, interesting.
That's the power of this rewiring. It's like, boom, you'll see your mind shift instantaneously.
Okay.
It's not that something that you have to do again and again and again. Excuse me. It's not something that you have to do all these times to see the effect of it. Yeah, you'll start seeing it. And every day then it compounds. It's cumulative in it, right? But you will feel better. You'll see better. You'll think clearer through the day. And at night when you do it, you'll sleep better. Your heart rate will drop down. Your HRV will go up.
How many times a day do you do it? For someone that they get on the app and you're saying if you do it before you go to sleep. Okay.
I'd say twice a day. Take 3 to 5 minutes in the morning, 3 to 5 minutes at night. Just do the process with it. And I will guarantee your world will start to shift and change.
That's awesome. I might check it out, or either just do a one-on-one with you and see what we can come up with.
Either way, I'm happy to help.
Apparently I'm crazy. Anxiety. Well, so we'll see.
I don't think you're crazy. I think you're just wired
a certain way.
A certain way.
Okay. Awesome, man. Thank you.
Cool. Well, thank you. I appreciate you having me.
All right.